After my fiancé won the top spot in the imperial exam, the prime minister's daughter targeted him. She confronted me with her head held high, sneering, "I have a wealthy, handsome childhood sweetheart. If you give Pei Xu to me, I will pair you two up." I rejected her. Back then, Pei Xu was as proud as the moon, refusing to sell out for power. Yet, after 30 years of supporting him through the cutthroat court, he remained just a minor official. On his deathbed, he muttered, "I regret it. Giving up my future for you to live a mediocre life, it just wasn't worth it." He passed away, utterly consumed by regret. I found my past life completely absurd. Reborn on the day Pei Xu topped the exam, I looked at the noble lady and smiled. "Who is this brilliant sweetheart of yours? I would love to meet him." Gu Huazhen paused mid-sip, clearly caught off guard. After a moment, she sneered, "You certainly know how to adapt." I gave a gentle smile. "Miss Gu, you are from a noble family. Naturally, your circle consists of only the best. Besides, winning the Prime Minister's favor is wonderful for Pei Xu. We grew up together for over 10 years. I only want him to succeed." Gu Huazhen looked quite pleased with my submissive attitude. She laughed. "I thought a country girl like you would be narrow-minded and cling to your fiancé now that he passed. It seems I underestimated you, but you are absolutely right." My father noticed Pei Xu even before the exam, saying he has the makings of a top minister, not to mention his striking looks, mentioning my usually high and mighty fiancé. This arrogant lady actually blushed. "Once we are married, my family will back him entirely to ensure he climbs the ranks quickly. But you?" She slammed her teacup down and stood up, looking down on me. She cast a cold, mocking glance my way. "Let me give you some harsh truth first. My childhood friend is from an incredibly wealthy, powerful family. He is handsome and brilliant, but extremely picky. Countless wealthy ladies line up for him, yet he never spares them a glance. You are pretty, but with your humble background," fearing I might back out, she quickly added, "Whatever. He is currently leading troops in the southwest and will return to report in 2 weeks. I can introduce you then, but whether he likes you or marries you is entirely up to your own charm and luck. Once we do this, you and Pei Xu will go your separate ways. No regrets." I nodded quietly to her. "I will keep your words in mind, Miss Gu." Satisfied, she smirked and left the tea house. I sat there in silence for a long time, watching my tea grow ice cold, while vendors outside began to hang up their oil lamps. Massaging my numb legs, I finally stood up and walked back. 2 weeks ago, Pei Xu and I had rented a small courtyard on the west side for the exams. Entering the dark, empty yard, no one was home. Today was results day, and a grand celebratory feast was being held, so he was likely still there. I quietly cooked a bowl of simple noodles, ate alone, cleaned up, and retreated to my room to unpack my needlework. Under the lamp, I began embroidering. The dark red sachet featured a reclining white tiger, which I started yesterday after waking up reborn. After 40 years as a housewife in my previous life, my embroidery skills had become incredibly refined. I bit off the final thread just as Pei Xu walked in. Seeing me sitting in the hall, he froze. "You're wrong. Are you waiting up for me?" It was only then that I realized it was past midnight. The red candle flickered, dripping hot wax. I smiled and said, "You're back." But he was returning 4 hours later than he did in our previous life. Back then, after the results, he had rushed home early. In that life, the Prime Minister had publicly offered his daughter's hand to him during the feast. Yet, my proud fiancé had flatly refused, unwilling to betray our lifelong promise for power. He had proudly declared he already had a fiancé, deeply embarrassing the Prime Minister. The feast ended on a very sour note, and he rushed home. The moment he stepped inside, he held me tight and vowed, "Yurong, we have been together for years. I will never abandon you." I never knew if he was reassuring me or convincing himself, but back then, I believed him wholeheartedly. Moved by his devotion, I hid the fact that Gu Huazhen had visited me. We married and settled in the capital. I foolishly believed that after surviving our initial hard years, a perfect life awaited us. But the vengeful Prime Minister ensured Pei Xu remained stuck in a powerless, minor post. Even classmates with far lower scores secured high-ranking promotions, while colleagues in his department turned a blind eye. No one dared to promote him. I supported him through 30 agonizing years, but he retired as a mere mid-level clerk. As I sat crying by his deathbed, he only forced a bitter laugh. Releasing my wrinkled hand, he stared blankly up and muttered, "Wei Yurong, I regret it. I spent over a decade studying tirelessly, pouring my soul into passing the exams, only to throw away my future for you and live in mediocrity. Looking back now, it really wasn't worth it." I stood frozen as he breathed his last. unable to cry or laugh. Thankfully, heaven granted me rebirth. It is time we both pursue our own paths. Tonight, Pei Xu was different. There was no anger over the forced marriage, only an eerie calm. I instantly knew he had reborn too. "What are you embroidering?" he asked casually. He walked over, but froze when he saw the red sachet. His face tensed. "Why are you starting this so?" He stopped mid-sentence, realizing his slip, then sat across from me and poured himself some tea. "The Chancellor showed me great favor today, promising me an influential, high-ranking post in front of everyone." Though he tried to look calm, the sheer triumph in his voice was undeniable, a position of real authority. His starting line in this life was already higher than his peak in our last. I offered a sincere smile. "That is wonderful. Your 10 years of study paid off." A smug look crossed his face, but his eyes darkened when he saw me stitching. He took a sip of tea and casually added, "Though blessings come in pairs, I just started my post and will be too busy to spare any time. You do not need to prepare these things so early." We both grew up poor and orphaned, relying solely on each other. To support his studies, I had embroidered day and night, selling my work for mere pennies. He used to ache with guilt watching me work. Before the exams, he even promised that the moment he secured a capital post, he would immediately marry me in style to give me a good life. Now, he was desperate to stall. I understood everything. Setting down my thread, I smiled. "You are overthinking. Who makes a red sachet for a wedding? Summer is coming, so I'm making a mosquito repellent. Besides, the man leading troops in the southwest will surely need it." Pei Xu exhaled in relief, gently saying, "I see. Once you finish, make sure to get some sleep. I drank a bit tonight, so I will head in first." He set down his cup and retreated, never mentioning the Prime Minister's proposal. 3 days later, Pei Xu was officially appointed to the prestigious ministry. A massive hoard of gold and treasures flooded our tiny courtyard, far exceeding what he got in our past life. The smiling messenger gestured at Pei Xu. "They say the greatest joys in life are a wedding night and a grand promotion. Master Pei, you have secured both at once. We are all so incredibly envious." He blinked in surprise when I walked out. "Oh, and who is this lovely lady?" "Please, do not tease us," Pei Xu interrupted, quickly rushing forward to block me from view. Bowing to the messenger, he said, "Thank you for the warm wishes, brother. Please accept this small token for your hard work." He reached into his rewards and handed him a shiny gold leaf. In this life, he was far more tactful and worldly. The messenger took a long, calculating look at me, then pulled Pei Xu aside and whispered, "You are a blessed man, but you must weigh love against a glorious career. Do not disappoint the Prime Minister." "I understand," Pei Xu assured him. Once the messenger departed, Pei Xu turned to me, his face twisting in annoyance. "Why did you come out? You almost angered my superiors." "My apologies," I whispered, forcing a smile. "I only wanted to sell some. I'm used to saving money, so I rarely buy jewelry or nice clothes. But since I'm going to see him, I can't look this shabby. Luckily, I still have some embroidery I can sell for cash to buy a decent outfit." Hearing this, Pei Xu seemed to remember how I used to stay up late working to pay for his tuition. His expression softened, and he told me he was heading out on business anyway, so I should just tag along. I nodded and agreed. But once we arrived at a massive estate on the main street, I realized he was actually planning to buy a house. This place was 3 stories tall, far bigger than where we lived in our past life, and the main courtyard was spacious and bright. The decor was not only exquisite, but felt extremely high-end. Best of all, a 100-year-old tree stood in the yard, lush with purple blossoms. When the summer breeze blew, petals danced through the air like snow. It was breathtaking. Sadly, I've had severe pollen allergies since childhood. The moment I stepped through the gate, I couldn't stop coughing. Only then did Pei Xu seem to remember my condition. He sighed helplessly and said, "I forgot your health was so fragile, but cutting down this 100-year-old tree would be a real shame." He gestured off to the side. Fortunately, the West Wing is also very quiet and quite pretty. In a couple of days, I'll have someone move your things over there. In wealthy estates, the small West Wing is where concubines live. Yet, I didn't even bother to argue. I simply used my hand to tightly cover my nose and mouth, slowly backing out of the gate. "A shame indeed," I muttered. He always thought I forgot. And to be honest, I had. But seeing this purple blossom tree, so rare in the north, brought the memories flooding back. In my past life, after he called off the wedding, Gu Huazheng married someone else. Too bad her husband was useless. Even with her mother's family backing him, his rivals still caught him red-handed and banished him to some remote outpost, never to return. 5 years into my marriage, I went back to his hometown with Pei Xun to sweep graves and saw Gu Huazheng. Her husband had completely hit rock bottom, spending his days drinking and chasing young girls. Heartbroken, Gu Huazhang moved out to live alone. That summer, right after a rain, as we walked down the mountain and passed by the river, we spotted a lovely little courtyard. By the gate stood a massive purple flower tree in full, gorgeous bloom. Underneath, someone was playing a zither. With just one distant look, Pei Xu stopped dead in his tracks. It was Gu Huazhang. She had lost all her former glamour, looking incredibly haggard and wearing no makeup. Dressed in plain white, she sang with her head bowed. The music sounded so desolate, it was heartbreaking. We stood there for who knows how long, until a zither string suddenly snapped. Falling petals drifted down, and she gently caught them in her palm. When she finally looked up, she noticed Pei Xu standing nearby. Her gaze held a complex mix of hatred and lingering love. After a long pause, she threw the petals into the air, turned back inside, and shut the door. Pei Xu stared expressionlessly at the purple tree, standing there for a long time before turning to me and whispering, "Let's go." Less than 3 years later, news of Gu Huazhang's death from illness reached the city. When Pei Xu heard it, the teacup in his hand shook, spilling tea everywhere. Yet, he said nothing, only retreating to his study to work through the night. Looking back now, I wonder if he had already regretted his choices. Moving into a new house requires a lot of preparation. In our past life, Pei Xu dumped all these chores on me. This time, however, he insisted on doing everything himself, running around town every single day after work. He wanted solid wood furniture that smelled of agarwood, the finest silk bedding that kept mosquitoes away while staying cool, and a smart, obedient maid to make life easy. Every single request was far more lavish than in our past life. Since he wanted me out of it, I was happy to enjoy my free time, wandering the city alone. Fortunately, he wasn't completely heartless and gave me a share of the money to spend on myself. I saved every bit of it, adding it to my own savings. I wanted a cushion for when we eventually split up, so I could start fresh. One day, I went to a fabric shop to pick out some clothes, and my eyes immediately caught a red fabric woven with gold thread hanging on the wall. The sharp-eyed shopkeeper quickly brought it down. "You have great taste, miss. This is our newest arrivals. It's cool as ice and looks incredibly elegant. Perfect for summer." I nodded and smiled. "Please cut 8 feet of it for me." "Oh, miss, with your figure you won't need nearly that much fabric. Are you buying it for your sweetheart?" The shopkeeper beamed. "Looking at your age, it's just about time to wed. Are you buying this for your fiancé to make a wedding suit?" "That truly is wonderful news." I thought about it and didn't deny it. He did love red. As we were chatting, 2 people walked in behind me, but I was too focused on the shopkeeper cutting the fabric to look back. That is, until a familiar sneer came from behind. "Miss Wen, aren't you rushing things? Nothing is even official yet, and you're already making a wedding outfit. How embarrassing would it be if it goes to waste?" I turned around to find Gu Huazhang and Pei Xu standing side by side. Our eyes locked, and Gu Huazhang's eyes were filled with mockery. She seemed convinced her childhood friend would never want me, and that I was just being delusional. After saying goodbye to her, Pei Xu dragged me back to our courtyard. Seeing me still clutching the red cloth, his eyes turned freezing cold. "Didn't I tell you there's no rush?" "What are you doing?" Meeting his dark gaze, I asked plainly, "Didn't you hear everything already?" He paused, let out a heavy sigh, and turned his back to me. "Since things have come to this, I won't hide it from you anymore." I set the red fabric on the table, sat down quietly, and asked, "Hide what?" Pei Xu looked back at me, then closed his eyes as if making a hard decision. After a long while, he managed to say, "At the victory banquet, Director Gu publicly offered to marry Huazhang to me." "So, indeed it was." I looked down with a faint smile. And then? He looked utterly helpless. I agreed. Seeing my silence, Pei Xu grew anxious and said solemnly, "You know how hard it is for me here without any backing. Securing my footing is hard enough. If I offend the Gu family and anger the big boss, all my years of hard study will go down the drain. Besides, although Huazhang is highborn, she isn't spoiled or reckless. She's straightforward, passionate, and stays out of petty drama. She never looked down on my poor background either. Once I marry her, I'll convince her to let you join as a second wife. She is kind and understanding. She will agree. Plus, with me around, I won't let you suffer." He frowned at the red fabric on the table. "You should return this red cloth. Huazhang will prepare everything for the wedding to fit the standards. She probably won't care for your homemade clothes anyway. Besides, as a second wife, you won't wear." In just a few words, he decided my entire future without once asking what I wanted. Remembering his regretful words on his deathbed in our past life, I paused, then shook my head slowly. I'm not returning it. Hearing this, he stared in disbelief. After a long pause, he snapped in frustration. Why must you be like this? He thought I was just throwing a tantrum until he saw the calm determination in my eyes and realized I meant it and was fully resolved. Irritated by my stubbornness, he scoffed and burst into a bitter laugh. Fine, suit yourself. It's not like you'll ever get to wear it anyway. If you want to keep it, then keep it locked away forever. I watched him storm off. But unlike our past arguments, I didn't run after him. Instead, I traced the patterns on the red fabric, remembering the proud, handsome young general who once told me, I love wearing red. On the front lines, it hides the blood so I can keep fighting. It intimidates the enemy, and even if I fall, I go out with dignity and style. He had looked deeply into my eyes and whispered, of course, wearing matching red with the one I love would be the ultimate dream. But back then, I was already married, so I could only wish him luck in finding true love, ignoring his disappointed gaze. Knowing we would meet again soon, I smiled. Sure, he would love this gift. After that day, Pei Xu moved into his new house. Gu Huazheng brought assistants to help their golden son-in-law pack. Sitting in the courtyard, I watched them turn the place upside down. The dirt floor was piled with junk Gu Huazheng deemed worthless, like quilts I had hand-stitched clothes and old shoes I had washed countless times, the warm knee pads I stayed up all night sewing before his exams, and the wooden hairpin I carved myself when we first fell in love. In short, everything connected to me. My things were thrown right at my feet. Gu Huazheng stood nearby, covering her mouth with a handkerchief. She said with sheer disgust, Pei Xu, I didn't know your life was so miserable back then, dragging around such a burden, keeping her by your side, yet she couldn't even take care of you. Every word she said mocked my uselessness. She had no idea that in my past life, when Pei Xu was targeted by Chancellor Gu, his stubborn pride made him refuse to yield, nearly getting him fired. I embroidered day and night, working for half a month just to scrape together 100 yuan so he could apologize to his boss. He went reluctantly, but the boss accepted. That was the only reason the matter blew over. But who would have thought a drunken Pei Xu would blast his boss in front of colleagues, calling him corrupt and shameless? Word got back, and they almost rallied the other supervisors to report him. In the end, I begged a wealthy lady and promised to embroider 100 birds tapestry as a birthday gift for the big boss. Pei Xu's job was saved, but that piece took me 2 full months and completely ruined my eyes. My vision blurred after 30, and I went blind in my old age, relying on a cane for decades. Looking back, he has probably forgotten it all. Facing Gu Huazheng's sneering sarcasm, Pei Xu coldly snapped that a country bumpkin like him couldn't possibly understand high society. I ignored them, focusing on the silk thread in my hands, silently recalling my last moment with that man in my past life. A red robe with a black collar suited him best. Seeing my lack of reaction, Pei Xu's face grew darker. He threw down a parting word obstinate and stormed out. 7 days later, I heard that Marquis Lingyun had returned to the city in the middle of the night. Surprisingly, Gu Huazheng kept her word. She had her maid tell me she would arrange a meeting with him tomorrow in her name. The maid then turned, chin raised, and slammed the door. Through the gap, her sneering, venomous laughter reached my ears. Ha! Who does she think she is? Dreaming of Marquis Lingyun. Even if you're given a chance, do you honestly think you could actually pull it off? I brushed it off. The next morning, I dressed myself up nicely and went to wait in the private tea-house room she mentioned. Outside, carriages bustled past as I quietly stared at my teacup and the drifting steam. The appointed time came and went, but he hadn't arrived. He must be busy, having just returned to the city, or maybe he simply couldn't get away. I decided to wait a bit longer. 10 minutes later, 3 fine horses galloped down the street, deftly dodging pedestrians. The leader wore a red robe and silver armor, his dark hair tied high. Exuding heroic spirit, he dismounted in one fluid, graceful motion, casually dusting off his clothes. His movements were effortless and completely composed. Tossing the reins to his man, he strode right into the tavern. Before long, steady footsteps echoed on the wooden stairs outside my screen. For some unknown reason, I actually felt a wave of nervousness. Through the screen, I watched his blurry figure approach. But just then, the young maid who had delivered the message rushed in, calling out to stop him. "Commander, something went wrong." Our lady's carriage was startled. "Please, come quickly." The man paused, muttering. "He's the one who wrote to invite me, claiming he had important news. Yet he's later than me? What a pain." He told her to lead the way, and they quickly headed downstairs toward the main street. Watching them disappear, I slowly let my shoulders drop. My tea had gone cold again. I picked up the cup and gently took a sip, letting the bitter taste slide down my throat. and sink into my chest. That evening, Gu Huazeng came to my courtyard. Spotting the small box on the stone table, she nudged it open with her fan and smirked. This robe is actually quite decent. Too bad you didn't get to deliver it today, did you? I reached out to close the box lid, finally looking up to meet eyes that were dripping with arrogance and disdain. Why state the obvious, Miss Gu? Unbothered, she sat down across from me with elegant ease. I told you before, Brother Jinlin has incredibly high standards. There is absolutely no way he would ever look at you. I had someone call him away today just to save you from making a fool of yourself. Do you even know his background? His father was the commander-in-chief's own brother, and his mother was a noble heiress. By blood, he can even call the sovereign his cousin. Though his parents died on the front lines years ago, their legacy remains. Besides, at such a young age, he has achieved brilliant success in the elite forces. Everyone in the city knows and respects him. With his lineage and looks, marrying a highborn lady wouldn't even be a stretch. Having said that, she sized me up with a cold sneer. Actually, it is my fault for letting you harbor such delusional hopes. If I had known Pei Xu would agree to our marriage so readily, I wouldn't have bothered with you that day. But since you are a struggling, lonely girl, I've decided to give you this sum of money on behalf of Pei Xu. From now on, you're just his distant cousin. Take the money, go home, and find a decent man. It was exactly as I had suspected. She kept him away today on purpose because she wanted to block our meeting. She went back on her word. I stared straight at her and smiled. How do you know he would look down on me? Perhaps if we had met today, we would have had a wonderful chat. Gu Huazheng's smile vanished. After glaring at me coldly, she snorted. When you're wrong, don't think that just because of your pretty face, you can make every man fall at your feet. She violently swept the box off the table, stood up and screeched. Let me tell you, neither Pei Xu nor Brother Jinlin would ever end up with a peasant girl like you. If you have any sense, stop daydreaming before you ruin yourself. With that, she stormed off. I slowly stood up and picked up the box from the floor. The folded clothes were in disarray, revealing a corner of the medical prescription hidden inside. I pulled it out and read it carefully, my mind drifting back to the second year of my marriage to Pei Xu. A plague had suddenly broken out everywhere, sparking widespread panic. The authorities ordered immediate lockdowns to contain the spread. Rural areas were managed by guard units, and he was assigned to lead them. He was rushed back from the southwest to protect everyone. I had just returned from a trip and was blocked outside the city gates. Orders were strict, and Pei Xu couldn't leave his post to help me, so I sent a letter to Pei Xu telling him not to worry. I took my maid and driver to find temporary shelter in a nearby village. But the plague was vicious, and within days, dozens of villagers fell terribly ill. The sheer tragedy was heartbreaking to witness. My father, a country doctor who died while treating patients, had left me a secret prescription, telling me that if I ever faced a severe and incurable plague, this formula might save lives. During those dark days, I wore a mask, set up a makeshift clinic, and went up the mountain before dawn to gather herbs, spending all my savings to buy the remaining ingredients. Once brewed, I distributed the medicine to the villagers. Soon, my efforts caught the attention of the local security forces, and that was when I first met Shen Jinlin. He was overwhelmed, with heavy casualties mounting near his camp. Many of his own soldiers had fallen, and the doctors were completely helpless. But looking at my prescription, a spark of hope ignited in his eyes. He moved his camp close to my village, assigning doctors to work alongside me. 2 weeks later, we saw real results. The day our first patient recovered, he forgot all protocol, burst in, and grabbed my hands. His eyes shone like stars. Miss Wen, your prescription is absolutely brilliant. He only realized his impropriety when I gently pulled my hands back. A bright blush crept over his face as he sheepishly scratched his head. I'm sorry, I was just too excited, he muttered. I smiled gently. You were only acting out of concern for the people, Commander. He looked up at me, momentarily lost in thought. After that, we worked side by side outside the city for 3 months, becoming close friends. It was then I realized he was the childhood friend Gu Huazheng always boasted about, though he showed clear distaste whenever she was mentioned. She and I are hardly childhood sweethearts, he remarked. When I asked what he meant, he hesitated, setting down his herbs before sighing. My parents died early, and my aunt couldn't raise me herself, so I was fostered by the Gus. I do owe them a debt of gratitude, and my aunt told me to treat them well. But her behavior is simply too outrageous. Her terrible temper and irrationality are one thing, but last year she wrote to me, claiming some man publicly rejected her, and actually demanded I seduce his fiancé to get revenge. Hearing this, I stared at him in disbelief. I pulled up my mask and listened to him continue. Just for his own selfish desires, He wants to tear others apart. That is utterly ridiculous. So I wrote back and scolded him harshly. From then on, we lost touch. Seeing my silence, Shen Jinlin stole a glance at me, lowering his voice. Miss Wen, please don't listen to the townspeople's gossip. I don't have a childhood friend or sweetheart. At least, not before this. I kept busy with my herbs, pretending not to hear, but I wasn't some naive little girl. I knew exactly what he meant. For a while, I avoided him, using work as an excuse. When the lockdown lifted, I took my assistant to town, relieved, without telling anyone. I didn't expect Shen Jinlan to chase after us on a fast horse. He insisted on riding with me, whispering, I don't know where you live, Miss Wen. I'd love to visit your parents to thank them for your help recently. That's what he said. But what else does it mean when a single man wants to meet a girl's parents? Realizing I couldn't escape, I slowly removed my mask in front of him. Under his shocked gaze, I bowed. Thank you for your kindness, leader, but it's not necessary. My husband is probably waiting in town to take me home. Right then, his face turned completely pale. This usually decisive executive stood frozen like a puppet, staring blankly as I walked away. Soon after, I heard he requested to be sent back to the southwest, leaving the city. One day, he suddenly sent me a small box containing half of his savings, leaving no note. I put it away, planning to return it on his next visit. I never expected that 3 years later, he wouldn't make it back. He apparently ran into the deep forest to save a girl, caught a strange disease, and died days later. I joined a training group going to his family home to quietly leave some flowers. Before I left, his subordinate slipped me another small box away from the others. Looking at me with a complicated expression, he whispered, I heard you and our leader knew each other because he saved you when your parents passed away. I nodded. He smiled bitterly. Now I understand. Turns out, the leader wasn't just trying to save that little girl that day, but he left the sentence hanging, shook his head sadly, and walked away. Back home, I quietly opened the box. Inside was another portion of his estate, along with a letter. The handwriting was no longer elegant, but crooked, like a farewell note. It had only 3 short lines. If only I had known sooner that you were his fiancé, I would have agreed to help, even if it meant breaking old rules. This prescription was the one Shen Jinlin, myself, and a dozen other doctors spent months developing in our past life. He said his trip back to town was to warn the boss about the Southwest epidemic, fearing it would spread. But because Pei Xu, the leading executive, insisted that remote regions naturally had bad air, and it wasn't a major outbreak. Despite his high rank, he couldn't fight the entire board alone. So the boss shelved the matter. That's what led to the massive outbreak later. Putting the formula back, I decided that if he wouldn't come to me, I'd go to him. Fate or not, delivering this recipe would give me peace. But I was stopped at his camp gates for 3 straight days. Today, hearing Shen Jinlan was heading to headquarters, I waited along his path. Instead of him, though, I ran into a grand wedding procession. I realized today was his wedding to Gu Huazhang. Dressed in a luxurious red robe on horseback, he frowned the moment he saw me. Wen Yurong, what are you doing here? Before I could speak, he hissed. Are you trying to crash my wedding? Hearing this, Gu Huazhang lowered her window, hiding behind a fan with a faint smile. Is our little sister here to congratulate us? You're quite early. Why not wait at the Pei Mansion instead? Have a cup of wedding wine to quench your thirst and watch the show. The onlookers stared. I stepped aside and told Pei Xu, forget the wine. I'm not here for you. But he didn't believe me. Terrified I'd expose our past engagement. He signaled his lackey, telling me through gritted teeth, cousin, don't say that. Since you're here, you must stay. Someone take my cousin back to the mansion and take good care of her. The lackey rushed to grab me. I knew exactly what he wanted to keep me out of sight so I wouldn't ruin his big day. He wanted to force me away and lock me up. I refused, fighting back wildly in the street and kicking the lackey hard. But as I turned to run, I crashed straight into a firm chest. Hands caught me, looked down, and froze. Instantly, I recognized his face. It was the grand leader, Shen Jinlan. He pulled me behind him, glaring at Pei Xu. Leader Pei, on your wedding day, instead of focusing on your ceremony, you're out here bullying a young girl? What is this? Gu Huazhang panicked. She lowered her fan, calling out, Brother Jinlin, why aren't you waiting at my house for the banquet? What are you doing here? I was on my way there, only to find you two making a public scene. Showing no affection for Gu, he frowned. In broad daylight, this is utterly disgraceful. Gu Huazhang gasped, glaring at me. If she hadn't come to crash my wedding, who would have even bothered with her? Crash your wedding? Shen Jinlin looked back at me, puzzled. After a pause, he asked, Miss, is that true? He was still just as kind and helpful as in our past life, soft-hearted and easy to talk to. But ignoring the other two, I grabbed his arm tightly. No, leader, I came here specifically for you. At that moment, Gu Huazhang's face turned livid. She lost all composure, screaming, Wen Yurong, are you still daydreaming? A toad wishing for a swan. I didn't even look at her, staring only at Shen Jinlan's familiar face. Remembering those 3 months in our past life and that desperate farewell letter, my eyes welled up. But he knew nothing of it. Suppressing my emotions, I said, I know you are worried about the Southwest epidemic. His expression changed instantly. I held up the wooden box. The prescription inside can cure it. Will you look at it, leader? Shen Jinlan frowned, looking doubtful, but he took the box anyway. He barked to his men. Change of plans. We're returning to camp immediately. Then he pulled me along to leave, ignoring Gu Huazhang screaming in fury behind us. Shen Jinlan, if you dare take her away today, we are finished. The surrounding crowd was already starting to whisper. Seeing her lash out like this, Pei Xun's face grew sour, but Shen Jinlan didn't seem to care at all. Before getting in the carriage, he just cast her a cold glance. You've said that 100 times over the last 10 years. Aren't we done yet? Let's end it completely today. He brought me to camp, calling his doctors to study the prescription. Opening the box, he stared at my red dress for a moment but said nothing. He took the paper out, set the box aside, and listened as I detailed each herb's role. Hearing that 2 of his men were already infected and quarantined outside the city, I suggested testing it on them. The doctors nodded, agreeing. The formula seems solid, and we're out of options. We have to try anything at this point. What do you think, leader? Hearing me explain, Shen Jinlan's tense expression relaxed a lot. He agreed, and the doctors rushed to brew it. By the time they finished, it was past curfew, so he escorted me home. Along the way, he hesitated, looking as if he wanted to speak. At my gate, he stopped, stared deeply, and asked, Miss Wen, have we met before? My heart skipped a beat, but seeing the confusion in his eyes, I forced a smile. Does it matter? As long as I can help you solve this epidemic, I'm content. This way, he wouldn't die. He won't die, will he? With that, I turned into my small yard. Before shutting the gate, I noticed him still standing there, staring at me with a knowing look. Over the next few days, Shen Jinlan frequently sent for me to visit his camp. We kept a close eye on his 2 sick soldiers. As they slowly recovered, the tension on his face finally melted away. One evening, after walking me home, he blocked the closing door with his hand and asked softly, We've known each other for so long now, yet Miss Wen has never once invited me in for a hot cup of tea. Meeting his smiling eyes, I suddenly saw a glimpse of his past life self. It took me a moment to snap out of it before releasing the door. As long as the commander doesn't mind my cheap, bitter tea, he burst out laughing. A traveler like me is used to drinking muddy river water. I'm hardly in a position to complain. I brewed some tea and invited him to sit in my courtyard. As we sat, his eyes drifted to a corner of the yard. It was the pile of belongings Gu Huazhan had ordered to be thrown out, which I hadn't cleared yet. His gaze darkened for a brief second before he asked, Forgive my bluntness, Miss Wen, but are you really Master Pei's distant cousin? I offered a soft smile. I had no intention of lying to him, so I prepared to tell him everything. But right then, someone barged through my front gate. It was Gu Huazhan. Seeing me drinking tea with Shen Jinlan, she shrieked, Brother Jinlan, are you seriously letting yourself be fooled by this wicked woman? Shen Jinlan's face instantly went cold. What are you doing here? I came here to warn you, to snap out of it. She pointed a trembling finger at me. You threw a tantrum, skipped my wedding, and ignored my letters. I had to send people to find you, only to discover you were hiding here. Do you have any idea what kind of woman she really is? She's incredibly vain, unfaithful, and completely shameless. Just a while ago, she told me with her own mouth that she was willing to give up her fiancé to me. But once she heard about your powerful family and high rank, she begged me to set you 2 up. How can you associate with someone so wicked? Hearing her lies, Shen Jinlan frowned and slowly turned his gaze toward me. After a silent pause, he nodded. I understand now. Then, a dark cloud seemed to sweep over his handsome face. He slammed his teacup down, glared coldly at Gu Huazhan, and asked with icy precision, Did you really think you could use me as a bargaining chip? Gu Huazhan, you've gone way too far. I hadn't expected him to read her intentions so perfectly. Gu Huazhan froze in shock. Finally, her eyes welled up with tears of self-pity. Brother Jinlan, how can you yell at me like this? This Wen Yuguang is nothing but a pretty face. You've only known her for barely 2 weeks. Yet you're taking her side and screaming at me. We aren't even from the same social class. Don't you know she clung to Pei Xu for years? They've probably been living like husband and wife already. She doesn't deserve you. Hearing this insult, I opened my mouth to fight back, but unexpectedly, Shen Jinlin spoke up before I could. So what? True love is about two hearts understanding each other. What does her past have to do with anything? He spoke with absolute calm, showing neither joy nor anger. His indifference made Gu Huazhen's venomous words feel like a punch landing on soft cotton. Ignoring her pale, defeated face, Shen Jinlan raised his hand and summoned the guards from outside. Take her back to her family mansion. She is utterly ridiculous. After she left, Shen Jinlan didn't press for explanations. He simply chatted casually, finished his tea, and took his leave. By then, the 2 sick soldiers at his camp had fully recovered, and the prescription had been rushed to the southwest. So, I stopped visiting the camp. No matter what ties we shared in our past lives, Gu Huazhen was right about one thing. He and I were from completely different worlds. He knew nothing of our past life, so finding a suitable match in the future was his best path forward. 2 days later, I packed my bags to head back to my hometown. But opening my door, I froze. There stood Pei Xu. As the Prime Minister's new son-in-law, he looked incredibly smug. Standing before me with his hands behind his back, he looked down on me condescendingly. You're wrong. I'm here to take you home. I instinctively took a giant step back. What on earth did this high and mighty official mean? He stared at me, chuckled softly, and strolled into my courtyard. Pouring himself a cup of water, he spoke as if granting me a royal favor. I told you before, if you were just a bit more obedient, Huazhen would easily tolerate you. You didn't believe me then. But did you know? She has actually proposed bringing you into our household herself. I stared at him, wondering if my ears were playing tricks on me. What did you say? She wants you to marry me as a concubine? Pei Xu nodded with a smug smile. Of course. She knows your reputation is ruined after staying with me for years, and finding a decent husband now would be impossible. She couldn't bear to see you miserable and homeless, so she suggested this. She has already prepared your side room. Stop playing hard to get and acting so ungrateful. Come home with me. Offer Huazhen a proper cup of tea, and she will treat you well. I finally understood. Gu Huazhen was only doing this because she couldn't stand the thought of me climbing up with Shen Jinlan. Since ancient times, a concubine is nothing but a servant to be bought and sold. Even if the first wife throws her onto the streets, no one would raise an eyebrow. If I became his concubine, I would be nothing but a toy in Gu Huazhen's hands, tortured and humiliated at her whim. As long as Prime Minister Gu held power, Pei Xu would never dare interfere. My destruction would be guaranteed. Realizing this, I shook my head flatly. I refuse. Pei Xun's face instantly hardened. Huazhen, the eldest daughter of the prestigious Gu family, has humbled herself to this extent for my sake. When you're wrong, what are you acting so high and mighty about? Do you really want to crawl back to your village and marry some low-class street vendor just to be a primary wife? Would that really be more respectable than being my concubine? Since we've already gone our separate ways, whether I marry or who I marry is none of your business. I stared back at him, my face completely expressionless. After a tense silence, Pei Xu let out a furious laugh. He immediately barked to his henchmen outside. Get in here and drag the second mistress back. What followed was absolute chaos. I grabbed a heavy broom and fought off his henchmen, but they eventually overpowered me and bound my hands. Just as Pei Xu ordered them to drag me away by force, the courtyard gate was kicked open with a loud bang. Shen Jinlin burst in wearing the red tunic I had gifted him days ago. In a flash, his blade was pressed firmly against Pei Xun's throat. Are you trying to kidnap this lady by force, Master Pei? Pei Xu hadn't expected him to show up. His face turned pale, yet he refused to back down, snapping, Your wrong was mine to begin with. What is wrong with taking her back to my home? If she was yours, why didn't you marry her when you passed your exams? Why force her into concubinage now? I could see that although Shen Jinlin tried to hide it, the fury burning in his eyes was terrifying. He had never been this angry before. Hearing this, Pei Xu sneered. This is a private matter. It doesn't concern you, Commander. As they stood at a tense standoff, Gu Huazhen caught wind of the situation and rushed over. Shen Jinlin, are you crazy? Do you have any idea what you're doing? Pei Xu is a government official? How dare you touch him? Shen Jinlin cast a freezing glare at her. Why don't you ask your dear husband what he is doing? Isn't she just a worthless girl? Is she really worth starting a fight over? Besides, I already said I've permitted Pei Xu to bring her in. Stay out of this. Pei Xu also sneered coldly at him, but Shen Jinlan remained completely indifferent to them. He simply turned his gaze to me and asked softly, "What about you? Are you willing?" Meeting his eyes, I shook my head with absolute resolve. "No, I'm not." "Good," he said. He pressed his blade slightly further forward, declaring with powerful authority, "In that case, no one is taking you away today." Seeing that Pei Xun's neck was already bleeding from a shallow cut, Gu Huazin's eyes nearly bulged out of her head. Her lips trembled as she repeated, "Fine, fine," like a madwoman. Suddenly, she pulled a sharp dagger from her sleeve. "Shen Jinlan, just for a poor country bumpkin you're willing to fight me? Then I might as well ruin her today to save us the trouble." She was the daughter of the Prime Minister. Injuring a commoner like me could be easily swept under the rug. Before I could even blink, the cold blade lunged straight toward me. I tried to twist away and close my eyes. But in that split second, Shen Jinlan's expression changed completely. He threw down his weapon and lunged toward me. The very next second, I was pulled tightly into a warm, protective embrace, only to hear him groan softly in my ear. Gu Huazin's dagger had landed squarely in his back. In an instant, blood soaked through his red tunic, turning the gold embroidery dark. Before passing out, he held me tight, turned back to look at Gu Huazin one last time, and said to her pale, trembling face, "With this blood, any debt I owed, the Gu family is officially paid in full." I stayed inside the Lingyun mansion, guarding Shen Jinlin for 3 whole days. Ever since he took that blow, Gu Huazhen had lost her mind with panic. Even Pei Xu hadn't expected things to turn out so terribly, since Shen Jinlan was a close relative of the Supreme Commander. He was the late Marquis' only surviving child. Aside from the 2 big bosses in the compound, who dared touch him, thankfully, his men arrived just in time, subdued those 2, and rushed us back to the manor. The doctor saved his life. He lost so much blood and remained unconscious, so I stayed by his side. His men told me he had gone to the compound to clarify my identity to the big boss and deliver the prescription to the high-ups. He claimed a massive reward for me, then begged the Empress Dowager to adopt me and marry us. He told her that although we only met 2 weeks ago, it felt like we had known each other for lifetimes and trusted each other completely. The Shen clan was small, and his father had died young, making him the Empress Dowager's only beloved nephew. She agreed to everything. That day, he had been coming to find me to share the good news. Looking at his pale face on the bed, I whispered, "How could you?" Tears blurred my eyes before I could finish. I collapsed by his bedside, crying silently, until a low, raspy voice joked, "Why cry? I am not dead yet." Having slept for 3 days, Shen Jinlin remembered our past life. Hearing that I had gone blind and been abandoned by Pei Xu, he was furious. He was silent, then ground his teeth. If I knew, I would have thrashed him. I did not know whether to laugh or cry, but since Gu Huazeng had hurt Shen Jinlan, we could not let it go. In fact, veterans in the department were outraged. They filed joint complaints, even evoking the memory of the late Marquis. Prime Minister Gu went to apologize to the boss, but got yelled at and had his daughter dismissed, and was forced into early retirement. When the high-ups learned how Pei Xu abandoned his fiancé after passing the exams and tried to force me into concubinage, the boss publicly condemned his ungrateful, wretched character. His brand new high-ranking position was instantly stripped away. But none of this drama mattered to me anymore. Once Shen Jinlin recovered, he took me into the compound to meet the Empress Dowager, who stared at me with shock, with clear admiration. She smiled at the boss. For 2 years, I showed him so many wealthy heiresses, and he rejected every single one. Now that I look closely at his choice, he actually has excellent taste. This girl has the skills to save lives and breathtaking beauty. Yes, they are indeed a perfect match. I was given a noble title and married Shen Jinlin right away. 3 years later, we brought our daughter back to the capital for a grand birthday feast. At the city gates, we ran into chained prisoners. As our paths crossed, the guards ordered the convicts to clear the way for us. They crowded together, watching our carriage enter the city. Curious, my daughter pulled back the curtain, and I looked out as well. I saw a familiar face. Pei Xu, a fragile scholar, stood out among the burly bearded convicts. He was incredibly thin, haggard, his skin darkened, and his messy hair hung loose over his shoulders. He was standing there in a daze, but the moment he saw me, he went wild. "You're wrong. You're wrong. I was wrong. I should never have looked down on you. I shouldn't have complained about your background or said those awful things before leaving. You're wrong. Please look at me. You're wrong." The next second, a guard noticed his shouting and lashed him with a heavy whip. "How dare you yell at Our Lady? Are you looking for a beating?" After a few strikes, he cowered in silence. I had actually heard rumors about his miserable state. Once he lost his job, he turned to heavy drinking, and his wife could not stand his constant screaming and demands for divorce, blaming her for everything. He yelled that bringing me to the city gave me the chance to meet Shen Jinlin. He claimed that if they had never met, I would never have found my husband, and she would be the commander's wife instead. Already hating my husband, Pei Xu flew into a drunken rage. Their screaming match turned physical, and since Gu Huazheng was a fragile woman, she stood no chance. How could she win? He beat her so badly she lost her mind. Although her retired father still had some influence, he had Pei Xu arrested and exiled to the border. Seeing him like this now only made me sigh. Even while being beaten on the ground, Pei Xu kept crying out my name. Feeling sick to my stomach, I tried to look away. Suddenly, a warm embrace wrapped around me from behind. A pair of large hands covered my daughter's eyes and mine, pulling us back into the safety of the carriage. Shen Jinlin had carefully peeled some fresh lychees on the table. He fed one to me and murmured, "Do not look at that trash. I do not want your eyes ruined like in our past life." My husband insisted my previous blindness was not just from late-night sewing, but from looking at that scumbag daily. He claimed his stupidity blinded me. I giggled. "Then I must look at you more to cleanse my eyes." Leaning close, he whispered, "Sweetheart, what do you want to look at on your husband?" I looked up and glared at him, but he only laughed and pulled me tight. Our daughter giggled at the sight. Looking at her face, which looked so much like his, I could not help but smile. In this lifetime, this very moment is perfect.